Oh hey, Ratchet & Clank. It's that thing I'm moderately well known for in the same way that Charles Manson is moderately well known for motivational speaking. We've had our ups and downs this series, but despite that, I've never stopped loving Ratchet & Clank, and admittedly, my love can come out in weird ways at times. Don't take that sentence out of context. I don't have room in my stony little heart for much, but Ratchet & Clank definitely has a spot reserved. Sometimes, though, it can be hard to get a passionate discussion going about even our favorite things because sometimes it's hard to find things to say that haven't already been said 100 times. But in light of recent news about Jim Ward, I would be remiss not to talk about his body of work in some way. That said, in spite of the melancholy reason for this topic, I do think there is quite a lot to be said about Captain Qwark as a character, because Captain Qwark happens to have one of my favorite character arcs in all of fiction. I would even go as far as to say it's the perfect character arc. That is to say, his arc between Ratchet & Clank 1 and Up Your Arsenal. I will say, first of all, in order to keep this Qwark focused, I'm going to try to avoid wasting time on summarizing several plot elements like the story behind Drek's plan to build a new home planet, what the protopets are, or the story behind Clunk, so if you don't already know what I'm talking about when I discuss these plot elements, you might be a bit lost. Sorry. When Captain Qwark was introduced at the beginning of the very first Ratchet & Clank game, he was very deliberately introduced as an almost deified figure. Not only was he introduced as someone who Ratchet looked up to, as well as being the only person who Clank thought could possibly save the galaxy from Drek, Qwark was also placed as someone who was impossibly hard to reach. Just like any celebrity you can think of, meeting them face to face seems like an impossibly hard task. There's an element of hero worship at play with how Ratchet & Clank both see Captain Qwark. He has an almost Superman level of mystique surrounding him. All we know at this point is that he's one of the galaxy's greatest heroes and has been for a great many years. But as we'll find out, the line between reality and fiction with Captain Qwark is a thin one to say the least. How much of his history is real and how much of it is fake is something that's alluded to but never fully confirmed. We do know, however, that there is an element of fabrication to his history based on various events throughout the series that hint towards this. Regardless, his heroism gives him celebrity status, and to a first-time player without the context of the rest of the series, meeting him for the first time is a big deal. But when you do finally meet him, he knows who Ratchet and Clank are and immediately wants to enlist their help.
Yes, I know who you are.
You do?
Yes, and thank the galaxy you found me.
Huh?
There's an awful plot being hatched to destroy our planets.
But he also seems weirdly timid in his delivery here, so something seems wrong. You don't quite know what's going on with him. This air of mystery continues until finally, Qwark uses Ratchet and Clank's naivete to lure them into an obvious death trap. It's here where it's revealed that Qwark was hired as the spokesperson for Drek's new planet and was specifically tasked with taking out Ratchet and Clank, which is how he knew who you were. We never saw how Qwark was before we see this version of him, but we see snippets of context that allude to him having been at least some sort of hero. We don't see his fall from grace, but we don't need to. Just from Ratchet's sense of wounded betrayal, that's enough to know that he was a legendary hero worth looking up to, and now isn't. This is where his arc begins, and this is honestly one of my favorite portrayals of Qwark.
Although there is one problem with your hypothesis. I'm not going to kill you.
You're not?
No. He is.
It's the most sinister he'll ever be. He comes across as a genuine self-deluded menacing bastard. It doesn't stay that way for long though, as his menace is chipped away at every point you see him interact with Drek, who treats him like a mangy dog. And Qwark shows himself to be a timid, groveling wiener, showing that his sinister portrayal is nothing more than an act.
I simply needed you to eliminate those two nuisances before they could cause any real trouble. But I wanted to... Do you still want to be the highly paid spokesman for my planet?
Yeah?
Then the next time I send you to do a job, I want results! Now get out of my sight!
But through all of this, there's one question that lingers. Why? Why has he turned his back on the people of the Solana Galaxy? Simply put, he's not half the man he used to be. He refers to the spokesperson deal as a comeback.
I'm the official spokesman for Drek's new planet. I can't have you two getting in the way of my comeback.
And Drek later briefly alludes to Qwark being washed up.
There is just one problem. I'm,
Too washed up for ground combat? True.
With these lines, we can infer so much about his history. He's been at this long enough that he's washed up and his star is fading, which paints the picture, in my mind, of a past his prime celebrity who's so desperate to hold on to their fame that they're willing to sell their soul to the devil himself. This endorsement deal that Drek is offering is his last desperate chance to hold on to his status, and he's willing to turn his back on the galaxy to get the deal. He's not an active participant, but he's complicit. He doesn't necessarily want to hurt anyone, but he won't lift a finger to stop it if it means a big comeback. In the end, when you finally find and defeat Qwark, he basically disappears from the plot altogether, aside from one interaction with Ratchet where Ratchet just plays along with Qwark's terrible disguise. You may say this is bad writing, but I think this is genius writing. Not for what they include, but for what they exclude. Ratchet's journey for revenge against Qwark ends anticlimactically because in the end, Captain Qwark turns out to be a joke, and him disappearing thereafter is basically the game showing him the respect he deserves. None. And his irrelevance in the game reflects his irrelevance to Ratchet himself. Ratchet saw him as a sinister villain because of how he portrayed himself in his initial betrayal, but Ratchet learned that Qwark was just a joke, so even when you find him later, Ratchet doesn't even bother taking him out again. He just plays along cause who cares? That's fantastic writing. His comeback was ruined, Ratchet and Clank sabotaged his place as the spokesperson for Drek's new planet, they badly wounded his pride, irreparably damaged his reputation, and exposed him as the goof that he is. This game isn't about Qwark's downfall, but it certainly encapsulates the beginning stages of it. And aside from a mid-roll credit scene, this is where we leave off after the first game. Now, Qwark's involvement in the second game is relatively minimal at first, mostly because he was a very late addition to the game. From where we left off in the first game, Going Commando certainly continues. Essentially, it's a year later and Captain Qwark is nowhere to be found, but throughout the game we get a recap of all the things that Captain Qwark has been up to, in a very matter-of-fact way as if to illustrate the game's absolute contempt for him. Going Commando in brief snippets throughout the game shows him spiraling towards rock bottom. A second attempted comeback is foiled when he's forced to pay the courts a 6 billion bolt fine, he tries to flee, is arrested, but eventually escapes. At first it seems like kind of a superfluous part of the game made solely to make fun of someone who's proven himself to be an irrelevant joke. That is until the ending, when it's revealed that the obviously corrupt Mr. Fizzwidget is Captain Qwark in disguise. He orchestrated the entire protopet ordeal to have a galaxy in peril so that he could save it and blame everything on Angela and Ratchet, thereby restoring his own image and in the process sabotaging Ratchet's newly established image. This is easily Captain Qwark at his most deranged. At this point, he's gone full tilt off the deep end, no longer being complicit in the destruction of a galaxy, now being the cause of it. There is no ambiguity at this point. His desperation for the limelight has caused him to become the ultimate villain. Well, ultimate is a bit of a stretch. And he would have gotten away with it too had his own technological incompetence not caused him to do the complete opposite of what he was intending to do, allowing Ratchet to swoop in and save the day. Now, if I'm being entirely honest, I think the ending to Going Commando is kinda lame and rushed because it cuts out about halfway through resolving the conflict. The next game starts with Captain Qwark at rock bottom and you don't really see him reach that point. The most you get is a short scene of him becoming a tester at the Megacorp production facility. How he got from the testing facility in the Bogon Galaxy to the Florana jungle of the Solana Galaxy is left
One of nature's mysteries!
And one that I definitely would have liked to see at least a bit of. And that takes us to Up Your Arsenal. The first two games were definitely stories that were pretty much exclusively centered around Ratchet and Clank, but I consider Captain Qwark to be the star of this game in the same way that Bianca was the star of Spyro 3. While Ratchet and Clank are still the main playable characters, Captain Qwark is the one that has all the story focus, and it starts out with him at absolute rock bottom. Shunned by two separate galaxies, foiled at every turn, and with his reputation in shambles, he loses his mind and becomes the leader of a tribe of monkeys. But with the return of one of Captain Qwark's greatest foes, Dr. Nefarious, they need him back on the front line. So with this, his redemptive arc can now begin. One of the major themes this game works with is mistaken identity. A big chunk of the main cast are treated like they're someone else. Ratchet, Clank, Courtney Gears, the Galactic Rangers, and Captain Qwark, because he's immediately given a hero's welcome upon returning after his memories are restored, as if he never went away, so to speak, but it's quickly made clear that there's nothing to indicate that he's actually changed at all. It's frustrating at first to us, as well as our duo, because Ratchet and Clank seem to be the only ones, minus Sasha, who know that Qwark hasn't done anything to earn back his reputation. Moreover, Qwark has an elevated level of self-importance as though he himself buys into his own bullshit, that he never left and he deserves the special treatment that he's getting. He truly believes himself to be the hero, even while he's actively avoiding the line of duty and knowingly taking credit for things he didn't do. And this is where that element of fabrication from earlier comes in the most. He proves proves that he's not willing to put in the effort, but is absolutely willing to take credit for other people's actions. And then in the vid comic portion of the game, there are times when it's alluded to him not having done the things that the vid comics depicted, like the ghost ship bit. And later, they outright admit that the ending to the 4th vid comic was completely fabricated. So this is where it's proven to us beyond a shadow of a doubt that Qwark isn't truly the person that he says he is, and never was. His taking credit for your actions continues throughout the game, but the mask finally comes off once and for all right around the end of the 2nd act. When the Q-Force infiltrates Dr. Nefarious' ship, it turns out to be a trap laid by Dr. Nefarious as a result of Clank's doppelganger Clunk. Captain Qwark, after everything he's done to avoid trouble, finally does a single heroic deed. As the ship is self-destructing, he rushes to grab something that he thinks is important. He's then lost with the ship, the lone heroic deed he does pretty much in the entire trilogy up to this point, and it seems to cost him his life. There is some solid redemption going on here. Even Ratchet momentarily gives him credit.
You would have waited for us, I think.
Good for him.
Wait!
Until the funeral, that is.
Captain Qwark had so many, wonderful qualities, I just don't know where to begin.
Such as?
Oh, okay. Well, I think I've droned on long enough.
However, that's not the mask-off moment. They go to the crash site and find that Qwark's not only escaped alive, but has deliberately faked his own death and ran. The reason why is left a mystery for a time. Ratchet even theorizes in a Chekhov's gun sort of way that Captain Qwark is in cahoots with Dr. Nefarious, and honestly, he has every right to be. Captain Qwark has done nothing to earn anybody's trust, especially not Ratchet's. Ratchet gave him credit in the moment, but now it's clear that there are shenanigans afoot, so that nullifies whatever props he'd given Qwark. Eventually you track him down to his secret base on the Thran asteroid belt, and as it turns out, he's not working with Dr. Nefarious, but his reasons for faking his own death, well...
When I escaped from that star cruiser, cheating death by mere nanoseconds, I suddenly realized something very important. I could have died! Me, Captain Qwark! Imagine an entire galaxy with no more me! And for what cause? So, a few trillion people get turned into robots. Who am I to say who should or shouldn't be turned into a robot?
This is Captain Qwark's mask-off moment, where he ultimately reveals his true colors. I believe it was Heath Ledger's Joker that said, in their last moments, people show you who they really are. And obviously, while Captain Qwark ended up surviving, he could have very well died on the ship. So in what could have been his final moment, it became a moment of clarity that gave Captain Qwark the introspection he needed in order to take the mask off that he'd been wearing for the entire game. The result being the most distilled Captain Qwark will ever be, and he's nothing more than an egotistical douchebag with a sense of self-importance so grand that he believes himself to be more important than the entire galaxy. He'd rather see the end of organic life than to imagine a universe without him. And more than anything, he's a coward who never truly wanted to be on active duty. The fact of the matter is, he never really changed. Even though he came back as the hero in this game, he showed that he's the same jackass who would be willing to turn his back on the people he's ostensibly supposed to be protecting at the drop of a hat. Even though he's not working with the villain, he's just as complicit in their potential victory as he was in the first game. In the end, it's Clank who's finally able to remind him of the hero he once was. A hero we've never seen, but rest assured once existed, and a hero that the Solana galaxy needs.
The people of this galaxy need you, Qwark. They believe in you. You can give them hope. You have a chance to redeem yourself and become the hero you have always wanted to be.
And with that, Captain Qwark disappears for the rest of the game until the final boss. Dr. Nefarious is readying his final attack, so to speak, when... Within the context of the story, not so much the gameplay, he's the one who swoops in to save the day in the end. Ultimately, he was able to put aside his ego, put aside his self-interest, put aside his cowardice, and prove to himself, Ratchet, Clank, and the whole galaxy that he truly is the hero that he's purported to be. And that right there is the conclusion to the 3-game arc of Captain Qwark. So let's recap. He started out as a galaxy-famous hero, but as time went on, he grew older and his star faded. In a desperate attempt to keep his relevance, he lost sight of his heroism and became complicit in a plan to destroy multiple planets, selling his soul for an endorsement deal. But failure after failure tarnished his reputation and his relevance faded to dust, until his desperation for the limelight made him the villain outright, as he crafted a catastrophe from the ground up in order to be the hero, but his desperation cost him everything and he firmly hits rock bottom. From there, he's given the chance to make a comeback, but phones it in while taking all the glory until a lone heroic act almost costs him his life. At which point he fakes his own death, showing his true colors as a narcissistic coward. He eventually comes back into the fold and saves the day just in the nick of time after having a change of heart due to a pep talk by Clank, changing for the better. That, in a nutshell, is the story they were trying to tell. So, what is it about this arc that makes it the perfect arc to me? Because it's far from a unique idea. Good guy turns bad and then turns good again. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself, etc, etc, etc. Well, there's this common misconception that tropes or general commonality automatically means bad, and the fact is, stories that exist with the same or similar templates have existed since the dawn of time. What it all comes down to is how you present it, which dictates the quality, and Captain Qwark's arc is insanely well presented. There are plenty of things that you can point to when discussing this arc and why it's so compelling. For example, each stage of his character's development feels like a natural extension of his character. One of the common complaints about the very first Ratchet and Clank game, which I somewhat agree with, is the fact that Ratchet comes across as so unreasonable at times, particularly in the portion of the game where he's mad at Clank for getting them into the mess with Captain Qwark. The shift in Ratchet's personality from the first part of the game to that part of the game was so sudden and jarring that it came across as somewhat unnatural. Like, he blames Clank for getting him into this mess, but he went along with Clank every step of the way, so he was just as much to blame. I saw what they were going for here, but it wasn't executed as well as it could have been. That is absolutely not the case with Captain Qwark. First and foremost, Captain Qwark is a very egotistical man. It's not made clear, but you can presume that there was a time when he did have altruistic intentions when saving the day, but his status and craving for his limelight changed his outlook on himself and the galaxy around him over time. Maybe his ego came with the territory, or maybe he always had an ego. It doesn't matter. Either way, his narcissism is the center of his personality that everything builds from, so the limelight is his drug, meaning that any sort of threat to his fame is a threat to the very thing he defines himself by. Whether that be age, irrelevance, other heroes, or even the consequences of his own actions. There's a level of insecurity that comes with his narcissism. He feels as though his fame is justification for his existence, so he will stop at nothing to justify his elevated level of self-importance. For a time, he was able to do that while also doing what he did best, saving the day, but as soon as he wasn't able to maintain his limelight for whatever reason, his ego couldn't take it. Then, once he had the opportunity to do things the right way again, he did it without hesitation, even if he was still taking the easy way out by taking credit for other people's actions. In every situation, he essentially takes the path of least resistance in order to feed and act in accordance to his ego. There's no doubt in my mind that he would have continued doing the wrong thing if it would have been easier and more effective than doing the right thing. He's also a coward. He'll absolutely take credit for the things other people do, but he almost refuses to put his own life in danger even for his own self-interest, and the moment things get even slightly tough, he scampers off with his tail between his legs. I mean, Captain Qwark never facing Ratchet one-on-one in the first game is, according to Drek, because Captain Qwark was too washed up for ground combat, but if he were fighting fit, would he be able to do it, or is he too much of a coward? There's no way to tell, but I think these things are both true to a degree. Either way, he showed a fair bit of cowardice even before the third game, but it absolutely was most prominent in the third game when he put his life in danger, at least before the ending, all of once, and was only ready to put his life in danger again when he decided to be a better person. There are a lot of people who will characterize Captain Qwark as being dumb, but I wouldn't go that far. That game doesn't count. Bumbling and incompetent for sure, but not dumb. Unless we're talking about academics. He's obviously not academically smart, but he's smart in a practical sense because he has a certain level of craftiness and improvisational skill which benefits him both as a hero and a villain. You don't disguise yourself and pose as a CEO of a major corporation or plan an attack against a major villain unless you know your stuff. So he shows himself to be smart in his own way throughout the trilogy. Thinking about it, from the moment we first see him all the way up to his pep talk with Clank, he never actually changes in any way. His personality stays consistent, his negative characteristics only become more prominent as he becomes more and more desperate. A lot of the time it comes across as the exact same personality trying to rationalize and deal with the situation it's currently in. But finally, once he's able to put aside all of his negative characteristics and do things the right way, that's when he's finally able to become exactly who he thinks he is and finally change for the better. And being able to put someone into different situations where they act in escalating levels of desperation and thereby act in different ways, all while also keeping them consistent, is one of the things that makes this arc so compelling, because the fact that he never changes, even while acting in different situations, makes the ultimate culmination where he finally changes all the more satisfying. You're finally able to break the never-ending cycle. And while each stage of his arc feels like a natural extension of his personality, each stage also feels like a natural extension of the previous stage. Of course, being a former full-time hero, he would be a little bit hesitant at first to turn his back on the people who he's supposed to look after. He'll do what it takes, but he won't exactly be fully committed to it. But after that, his self-destruction goes into full swing. At that point, the same desire to regain his stardom is still there, only now the desperation sets in, and so he'd be more willing to really push the envelope that he wasn't really willing to push before. He'd be more willing to be villainous on a more hands-on basis. You know, push a man to the edge and see what he does, that kind of thing. But what is evident in much of the trilogy, Up Your Arsenal especially, is that even if it's for selfish reasons, he enjoys being the hero. He wouldn't have been the hero in the first place and wouldn't have tried to maintain his status for so long if he didn't enjoy it. So of course, once the opportunity comes up to be a proper hero again, he would want to step into the limelight and take the glory once more without hesitation. And the fact that he enjoys being the hero, all it really would take is somebody to finally break through to him to make him realize that he had to stop half-assing it and do the right thing again. Feeling organic is the basis of his character arc. Nothing about his character arc feels forced or rushed. It just feels like a very natural evolution of what somebody in his shoes might go through. In fact, one of the things that really benefits his character arc as far as feeling organic is how much of a slow burn it was. There was nothing rushed about it. You get to savor every single portion of this arc because they took their time with it and executed it piece by piece over the course of 3 games. One of the many problems with Ratchet 2016 and the movie is the fact that they attempted to squeeze Captain Qwark's arc and redemption into one entry, and I guess in the movie's case they weren't really guaranteed to get a sequel, and so redeeming Qwark in 90 minutes was probably the only way they could have done it. But it came across as so half-baked because you really didn't have time to savor his turn and subsequent redemption. You didn't get the different stages, you didn't get him hitting rock bottom, it all just kinda happened. Where being able to see each subtle shift in his actions and how he deals with each situation gave it a more authentically compelling presentation. People in real life don't change just like that, and so the slower the burn, the better the flame. It also gave you much more context as to what exactly he was feeling in that moment and why he was doing the things he was doing, where his mind was at and what his motivations were. But overall, the most compelling thing is just how tragically relatable it all is. The fear of losing something on which we depend is something that I'm sure we've all felt before. Sure, he doesn't need his status, but he's so self-deluded that he believes he does. He's such a legend in his own mind that he defines himself by his own status, so much so that he sees an attack on his fame as an attack on him. As Ratchet so matter-of-factly put it,
You're pathetic, Qwark. I can't believe I once looked up to you.
I can't hate the guy. I just pity him. And there's something so tragically relatable about someone who's so desperately clinging to what they depend on that it slips through their fingertips. While we may not agree with him, there's a method to his madness, even when he is genuinely mad. And through his entire arc, he has a level of wit and charisma that makes him an enjoyable character to watch. If he wasn't so inherently likable with all his odd quirks and stupid actions, this arc probably wouldn't have worked as well as it did. We want to like him. He's a fun character. And coming around to being able to like someone who we want to like is a little cherry on top of what makes a great arc. And none of that would have been possible if not for Jim Ward's expertly crafted portrayal of Qwark. His performance captures that pompous, larger-than-life arrogance to a T. I can't say if anyone would have been better for the job, but for the material he was given and what he brought to the table, his performance tied it all together into what has become a truly iconic character. From a relatively generic premise, everything about this arc comes together like a series of jigsaw pieces to create what I believe to be the perfect character arc. It's simple, but it's so incredibly well presented that I can't really think of any one major flaw with it that isn't justified in some way at least. Part of me thinks that the reason Captain Qwark was never all that great after Up Your Arsenal was because they couldn't really figure out what to do with him once his character progression was complete. They probably had this 3-game arc mapped out, and if not, they stumbled dick first into success, but that was as far as it went. Now, I don't honestly know if Insomniac Games are going to continue the Ratchet & Clank series after Rift Apart, mentioning nothing about that ending, but if they do decide to keep the series going, I think it's high time that they retire Captain Qwark as a character. And I don't mean to say that because of the character direction, because you can always find new and interesting things to do. For me, it's more so out of respect for Jim Ward. For as brief as it was, Scott White did as good of a job as you could have hoped for in Rift Apart, but when the standards you're working with are as good as you could have hoped for, I don't think it's worth it anymore. It's always been Jim Ward's character, and without him, it'll never be the same. So I'd be fine with Qwark, how do I put this in the softest words possible, just not being there anymore. Man, I ended this on a bit of a dour note, didn't I? Guess I just can't help myself. Whatever the case, whatever the future may hold, we will always have those first 3 games, and that's good enough for me. It was Qwark's perfect arc, and that makes everything worth it in the end. And Jim, on behalf of the entire Ratchet & Clank fanbase, we love you, buddy. Ratchet & Clank will never be the same without you.